Good evening, everyone. Got hit with a cold last night that hit pretty hard. So apologies in advance if I am even more nasally than normal. You know how this goes. I know it's a little different because we had the 3 hour long marathon session yesterday. So hopefully cleared out most of the questions that you guys have. But as always, want to open up the floor and answer any questions you guys may have. Oh, one side note, just had a handoff meeting with Karen and Nathan and Ryan, who is going to be coming back and TAing. I think they have their weeks split up. So Caitlin will be your TA for part of the week and Ryan will be your TA for the other half. So really, really excited. Nathan has a lot of great content prepped for you. It's actually already loaded up into the classroom repo. Not to say that he's any more prepped than I am or anything. But he is super excited to come in, and I am excited to have you guys have him as an instructor. All right, that's my only update. I will shut up now until I hear a question.
I was wondering about that third parameter for the next parameter for the middleware functions. Just wondering, like, I understand what it's doing, but I'm just wondering what exactly it's passing in there. Is it just looking ahead to what the next function is going to be and grabbing that? Okay.
Yep. Basically, there needs to be some way of stopping the flow of a middleware, right? So if you want your auth middleware to be in there and say, hey, like they shouldn't be able to run any of the code at this endpoint, like we want to very explicitly tell them it is okay to move on from this middleware function to either the next middleware function or to the actual endpoint itself.
Okay.
And so that's why we have our rec and res, because our middleware definitely could use some information coming in. In fact, most middlewares do look at something in the res. And it is possible that the middleware itself ends up being the last function that runs, right? If we are going to send them back a 401 unauthorized and some error message with it, we still need the ability in that middleware to res.send, error not logged in or wrong password or whatever. But we also need the ability to say they passed this level of the middleware. We did whatever we needed to the request, or parsing things out, or shoving things in res.locals, or whatever it ends up being. Now we need to move on to the next thing in the chain. And so that is literally the next parameter that Express is providing to you. Express is passing in and doing the handling to literally say move on to the next part of the function chain or the endpoint chain.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of like with an array method or something where there are set parameters and the third one is always going to be next. And is there a fourth one, or?
Not that I know
Just
of,
takes
no.
three. Okay.
And theoretically, you could have an infinite number of middlewares. So like it is common to right, we used 3 last night. We had body parser, we had cores, which were coming from npm and provided middlewares to us, pre-built middlewares. Then we made our own with auth, and then finally we had our actual endpoint function that ran. There's nothing saying that you have to jam it all into one middleware. It is common to say, hey, the first middleware we're going to do like validation and make sure that they actually did send in some JSON. Now we're going to do another middleware where we're going to do the auth validation and check the headers and all of that. Okay, now we're going to have some middleware that I know I need to pull in information from a third-party API. So, and that happens on multiple endpoints. So I'm going to go do that and log all of that in. So it is definitely possible to have multiple middlewares. The other kind of more advanced concept is it is possible to have multiple sub apps in Express where you can use a router on the back end to apply a middleware to a group of endpoints, but not to the entire app. And that's not a concept that we dived in too much. I'm pretty sure React calls it, I'm pretty sure Express calls it a router. And that's how you can break up your code normally across multiple files and apply middlewares to just specific parts of your backend.
Oh, okay. And that's all, yeah, so that's Express that has those rules about the first thing is rec, the second thing is res, the last thing is next. And can you add your own parameter in there? Is there any circumstance where you had a fourth one that was like your own thing that you're trying to pass in there to do something, or?
Not that I know of.
I was also wondering, I was trying to figure out, because you have the repeated, like the is logged in middleware, and then down in the actual endpoint, you have basically all the same stuff repeated again. So I was trying to think if you could pass something else in there and have that like change that one line. But I was also kind of wondering why next wouldn't work in the actual endpoint.
Because there's
Instead of
nothing,
success, true.
there's no next thing after it.
Okay.
Right. So the last function in the chain, there is nothing
Oh, in that
to
chain right
next
there.
onto.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah, I hadn't quite thought that through completely yet. I was just trying to brainstorm.
All good. I'm trying to find the
Okay, so the next is causing you to get the error. It's not passing on to the next thing. It's causing you to get the error in the middleware.
the middleware is saying basically if there is an error, we don't want them to be able to get to the actual endpoint that does like service order.create or whatever we did.
Right.
So the next is saying only if you clear all of these gates, move on to the next chain in the
Okay.
function, in the route. But
Okay,
if you
yeah, so it's not telling you to go to else. It's telling it to go to, but the next thing would be to log in, right? Yeah, what's the
so
difference?
hold on, let me
Because
pull
in
up
the case
code.
of the post, like the post endpoint, the next thing would be to go to customers. But that would be in the front end. It's allowing you access to, we told it to go to customers in the front end. That was the window dot. It's like we set the window to customers. I forgot the syntax, but
Yep, let me just pull up.
oh wait, I need to be in the logged in screen. That's why I can't find it. Yeah, window.location equals / customers.
It's going to be a pain. Give me a second to pull that code up. Okay, so what our middleware is doing is we put our is logged in middleware up here, and then we threw it into the chain down here. So basically, first thing it does, it's going to match on our route. Second thing it's going to do is not go to is logged in middleware, it's actually going to run body parser on our request. Body parser is automatically going to call the next function behind the scenes, and that is going to make cores run because that's the next thing in the chain. Cores is then going to call next. And now we're going to go down to our is logged in middleware. Our is logged in middleware gets access to rec, res, and next because every middleware always gets access to at least those three. I'm not aware of a fourth one. That's not to say there isn't one. So what we are going to do is we're going to go through a bunch of if statements. And if at any point we want to kick them out and not run the next thing in the chain, we're just going to res.send. It is theoretically possible to res.send and then do some things after the middleware, you couldn't res.send again after that chain. But theoretically, there would be times that you were like, all right, let's res.send, report generation started. And then in the actual endpoint, we would kick off that and create the file and do the database queries and all of that stuff. But most of the time, the thing that is going to res.send is in the route itself. So what we're doing is whenever we hit a condition that is not true, we don't call next and we just res.send back the error information. If everything is correct, we call next. Well, next is coming in from Express. Express is logged in middleware. Oh, what they want me to do is come back to here and run the next point of the endpoint, which is all of this code. So, excuse me, if next never gets called here, then none of this code ever runs.
Right. I was comparing it to the post for I guess I should have specified the login, which is basically all the same stuff, except for success is true and stuff.
Yes, you probably noticed that I did a quick pivot on that and went, oh crap, I'm just gonna copy this out. It is totally possible. Let me see if I can figure that out.
Because that way you wouldn't have to repeat it. I don't know.
Yeah, no. We could totally do that. We should be able to, because we do rec.headers, we do the find one, we res.send all of that back. So the only difference.
The success thing is matching the front end. It only goes through if success equals true. So you'd have to change something on the front end too, right?
Yeah. So if we did is logged in middleware here, and then if it made it past here, all we would have to do is our res.send success true.
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise, if this doesn't call next, this is going to take care of all of our errors for us. And so if this does end up calling next, we can just assume that res success is true, which is definitely a good refactor and something that on the fly I didn't think to do, but that is a good way to do it.
Okay, cool.
And should that be? No, it should be white. Okay. I don't know if I misspelled that. But great question. Thank you for bringing that up, and hopefully helpful for other people for thinking through that middleware chain again and understanding that it is, if you want to think about it as an array of different functions and the middleware is every function in that array, I would bet that Express under the hood is using an array and keeping track of the index and looping through it that way.
Cool, thanks. I actually tried to find that next thing in the Express documentation and I found references to it, but no place where it just explained like what parameters the function would take or whatever. So that's helpful.
Yeah. Thanks. Their API reference is pretty bad. But their guide is helpful. So I will post that in the student resources channel. Specifically around a middleware. And then the other thing I wanted to post was the ability to use multiple routers. Is it going to let me link to this section? No, their API isn't that good. And I also shared a link to the routing of an example of how you can set up multiple routers that would have things on different pages. And then the routers, you can apply middlewares just to that router instead of applying it to the entire server.
Cool, thanks. I also, when I submitted my homework last weekend, I put in a delete request or attempts. The delete one works, the put one was not working. I know you haven't gotten to the homework yet, but I don't know if nobody else has any questions. I was wondering what I did wrong there.
I will let anyone else ask a question while I pull that up. Do you happen to remember what homework assignment number that was?
I mean, I could just share my screen too, but
Oh,
it was
yeah,
like 57
that
or
works.
58, something like that.
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen. That'll be easier.
I have it commented out, so I should probably.
So your first name, last name, all of those, they aren't coming from the params. They're coming from your body, probably.
Okay, I have to unmute myself. Oh no, I am muted. Okay. I'm sorry,
So
what did you say?
let me get in. Zoom.
Oh,
So you use rec.params on the customer ID right here
okay.
because that's matching your customer
Mhm.
ID up here. But
Okay.
all of these, you got it, are coming in from your body.
Okay. So I just have to change all these and then test it again in Postman.
Yes, because everything else looks right.
Okay, thanks.
And that's the common thing, right? Is it coming in rec.query? Is it coming in rec.params? Is it coming in rec.headers? Or is it coming in
I just
rec.body?
saw this here and I assumed, yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm gonna try that.
No problem. You always see other people's problems and go, well, that was a simple fix. And then you try and do it yourself and get stuck in the exact same spot. And it's like, darn it. Always harder when it's happening to yourself.
Hey Max, did we have an assignment? This is Latonia. Do we have an assignment from this week?
I
I
have
just
not
want-
posted it yet. I will work
Okay.
on that right now unless someone else has another question.
Okay, no worries. Thanks.
Figure out what our last assignment number was, and then I will create that. We are on to assignment 59. Now the challenge will be when I'm creating that assignment, what are all the things that we covered this week? Because boy, did we cover a lot.
We did. And you said it's going to be centered around the appliances project, right?
Correct.
Okay, because I kind of want to feel like I'm making progress if the homework is not based on my capstone. So I can do stuff on my capstone and feel like I made progress. Okay, thank you.
Yep, that is completely fine. The only required part of the homework is going to be 25th. Yeah. The only required part of the homework is going to be like get create and read operations working for a services order. So like making sure your SQLize is connected in, making sure that you've got React set up, making sure that you've got router working, all of that kind of stuff. Like get the results showing up in the table. And then I'm just going to go on a spree of like optional extra credit. And if you want to do that optional extra credit on your own capstone, then feel free to turn in your capstone in addition to whatever the homework assignment is.
Now, what if whatever the extra credit is doesn't line up with your capstone? Can you still turn in your capstone and
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only required part will be the appliance case for like getting service orders to show up. All the other extra credit, if you do some of it in the appliance case, some of it in your capstone, all of it in your capstone, only a couple of them in your capstone, whatever. It's whatever you would like feedback on, feel free to submit. feel free to ask questions if anyone has them. I'm just typing off to the side here.
It's still not updating with the body, change params to body. It's supposed to come back, like when the data comes back in the bottom at Postman, it's supposed to have the new information, right?
Yes, as long as you
Yeah.
have an await before your customer.save or service order.save or whatever it is.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen and let's take a look.
So there's the await and then Postman. I tried to change like the zip code and the area code on the phone number and it's not changing.
Scroll up just so I can see the ID. Okay,
11,
so your
yeah.
11 is right. And scroll down a little bit. 7890456.
Yeah, I changed that to a
Oh,
315.
the 315, got it.
Yeah, and I tried to change the zip code to 13212.
Try popping over to Beekeeper Studio and seeing if it's updated there.
Oh, I thought to do that. Number 11, no, it's not.
Okay, so then let's go to your backend code.
Unless I need to refresh something. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, there is a refresh button somewhere in Beekeeper Studio.
Yeah,
for
but
the
it didn't do
table.
anything, so.
Okay, cool.
Back to code. Oh, wait a minute, I need to change that there too?
Nope, because that is coming in from your params.
Yeah, okay,
We're
right,
definitely doing a put in Postman, right?
yeah,
Okay.
2001, that's the correct number. I checked, because I've got
Scroll
multiple ones going in different projects.
scroll up to the top of your body.
In the Postman
Yep.
or here?
No,
Yeah,
no,
the
you're
body.
good.
Yeah.
All right, you've got me stumped. Go back to your code.
I did save it.
You did. Scroll up. Is there an error in your terminal?
Oh, here, I don't think so.
All right, let's do this. Let's throw a console.log after line 85 to do a console.log customer to edit. And save that. And then let's go to your db.js.
Okay, I got stuff in the way here.
Yeah.
All right, yep.
And throw oh, you already have logging off. Okay, that's good. Go back to server.js and then run the command in Postgres and let's see what comes out in the terminal.
And
And
Postman.
Postman. Yes, sorry.
And then check the terminal.
Scroll down.
Oh, right, because I already scrolled way up.
And then. Okay, so it's finding your customer properly.
Yeah, those are just repeating. Those are all the requests.
So let's And it's hitting the right endpoint. Now you've got me confused.
Yeah, I mean, I had a second, this is originally from a second version of appliances too, because I was trying to like practice the code a second time. But I think I've got everything lined up to 3001, so I don't think that should be the problem.
Yeah, scroll down just to your server.listen in your server.js. Yeah, you're on 3001. That's what's console logging, so we know that's not the problem. We know it's even hitting the right endpoint. Throw a console log around line 95.
Oh, console log this whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And take out your semicolon at the end.
All right. There. Okay.
And run it in Postman.
Right.
And then go back to VS Code. See, it's not running that line. That
Undefined.
console log is all above it, I think.
But look, it's undefined. All the,
Oh, maybe your problem is go back to Postman.
uh-huh.
Your raw is set to text. It's not set to JSON.
Oh.
Okay, well, we celebrate different errors. Okay, let's go back to VS Code and see what the error is now in our terminal.
Okay, wait a minute, back up.
Unexpected token curly brace on position 288. So go back to Postman. And I'm guessing you have some invalid JSON, maybe a comma hanging on after the last field.
Oh, okay, yep, because I copied and pasted this. I don't want to type all that, so I copied and pasted it from what was coming back and changed it.
And if you scroll
Is that right?
down,
Yes, it worked. Thank you.
no problem. See, I told you, you're getting me at half speed today. It's like, the brain will get there eventually. Just give it a minute.
I feel better that I wasn't doing anything wrong in the code. It was just I didn't know how to use Postman.
Assignment is posted in Google Classroom. If you guys want to head over there, I will post the link to that in the Zoom chat. And then if you guys have any questions about the assignment, feel free to let me know. We'll try to get to grading on Monday. Hopefully my cold will not be as bad then. For both the past week that I'm past due on and this upcoming week's homework assignment. And if there are any concepts that we did cover last week that I left off the list, feel free to let me know and I'll edit the assignment and throw them in there.
Thanks, Max. That looks, I just read through it and it looks solid to me. This is Latonia. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, you probably can hear Columbo in the background. I wanted to say, but we can submit it separate, right? Like, we don't have to submit our capstone at the same time. I'm just worried about like time management at this point, so.
Yeah,
I wanna
no,
do
you
The homework, okay.
feel free if at any point you want feedback on your capstone, just send it to me in Slack, or sending me a GitHub link is fine if your code is getting pretty big.
Okay,
So however you send it to me is fine. But if you would like feedback at any point between now and August 26th on your capstone, feel free to do that on the side.
okay, and you don't need our whole code package when we do send you code. I've been doing it as like a convenience thing so you can see it, but if we just sent you the file, that's sufficient? Or just
Yeah,
go
that's
to
fine.
GitHub? Okay, all right, thank you.
Either way is fine. I've got fast enough internet that downloading a couple 100 meg file isn't that big of a deal for me. So whatever is easier for you to send it as is works for me. Phobelia, glad you worked out your grid question. If it turns out you haven't worked it out, feel free to come off mute and share or send a little bit more info in the chat. But Bootstrap Grid, I think, was what made me realize that I could make websites and that I didn't want to just throw my computer out the window. Because when I learned HTML, no one told me about the grid, and it was all about CSS and the different display properties: display fixed, display static, display relative, and just moving things around. And it was like one of those there has to be a better way kind of moments. And when I learned the grid, it was like, oh, there is a better way. Like, I don't have to go crazy. I can lay out my components in a way that makes sense. So the grid can be frustrating, but if you kind of visualize out the grid and think about where you want things to go first, implementing them in your code can be a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I do have a question.
Yep.
It goes back to images in the grid. Do I have to edit the size of the image that I'm using before I put it into the grid?
You'll want to put a style on that image, whether it's through a class name or an inline styling, where you say width : 100%.
Okay.
And the width 100% will make the image automatically shrink down or scale up to fit in whatever column size you put it in.
Okay. Thank you. I will try that. If not, I will be slacking you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Is
I
it
will
okay
be
if I-
offline tomorrow morning, but I should be around the rest of the weekend. So
Okay.
feel free to send me messages in Slack even in the morning, and I'll get to them when I'm back online.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to piggyback off of Stacy's question if possible. I actually thought about Stacy when Laura posted something about an arts and culture festival. It just made me think of Stacy. But at any rate, I had the same question, but about video. Should I be trying to compress these things or something?
Yeah, serving video assets is a huge rabbit hole that could be, you could be an expert in hosting video and do that as a full-time job. It gets real complicated real quick, which is why you find most people will either use YouTube for all of their video hosting, or if they need more control at a professional level, they'll host all of their video over at Vimeo or Vimeo, or however the correct pronunciation is, and then allow you to download the videos from there. For the sake of your capstone, you are probably fine just leaving the video assets in your public folder or your source folder, either way. If you were to launch this as a production website, video bandwidth gets very expensive. And so running it through a content delivery network that is specialized for video, like Vimeo or YouTube, is probably a good idea. But for the sake of MVP, having your video files in your source or public folder, if you're using React, is okay.
Thank
At
you.
a
I tried to keep it manageable. I was like, I thought it would be like this whole database of like a ton of videos and stuff, but so, okay. And I don't mind if it takes a little extra to load.
Yeah, GitHub pages will have limits around how big your repo can be and then how much bandwidth they will serve. And so theoretically, if you hit that limit, your videos on your website or your website itself would stop loading. So that's something to keep in mind. But a video CDN is kind of out of the scope of the bootcamp curriculum.
Okay, like what kind of search words would I use for that? Just like GitHub pages, video limits, or something like that?
GitHub pages bandwidth limit,
Bandwidth, okay.
which is 100 gig a month. I will dump that in the Slack.
Thank you.
And then
Excuse me.
and then any kind of CDN you could look into. Amazon Web Services is called CloudFront. There are other CDNs that specialize in video assets. But again, probably not something to worry about for capstone presentations and something only to think about kind of more long term.
Okay, okay. I had another, you said for the repo, is there a way where you can cross function repos? Or if you put it in one repo, it just needs to work in that repo? Just for some reason, when you said that, it just made me wonder if you could do that.
You mean have the videos stored in one repo and then the code stored in another?
Or break it up in any other way? Like, is there just any way where you can have your code work across different repos, or does it just have to be contained in one?
No, I mean, there's nothing saying you can't duplicate your code across multiple repos and have it working in different places. And there's nothing saying you can't link to a file that is stored in another repo.
Okay.
But I believe the 100 gig bandwidth limit is 100 gig across your entire account.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
not 100 gig per repo. Basically, that is kind of the same approach you would take with a CDN, though, is that you would store all the videos in the CDN, and then in your code, you would just reference the link to the CDN instead of referencing the file path directly in your public or source folder. Just be careful with the CDN because there is a free limit. And then once you pass that limit in terms of, number of gigabytes being transferred, you'll start to pay for that.
So Max, what are you gonna do with yourself? You're
Oh
gonna
my
have
God,
3 full hours free, and I know you're already missing us, but like, what are you gonna do?
I have a week left with my parents in South Jersey, and then I am headed down to the Raleigh-Durham area. And so I've got to figure out all of the stuff that I've gotten out of my storage unit and kind of moved into my room here, what's getting packed with me and what's coming down. Probably no more bears. Raleigh-Durham is definitely more has a much bigger population than Asheville, North Carolina. It's, I want to say like 3.5 hours maybe from the Raleigh area over to Asheville. Asheville was never really a long-term consideration for me, just because it's a little too small. But Raleigh is next on the list of figuring out. I've got a furnished apartment, and it's part of an apartment network called Landing. So they're in like 80 different major US cities, and you just have to give 30-day notice in order to move to another one. So it's all of these furnished apartments, and you can literally just hop from city to city and say, all right, let me spend 2 months here. And then, all right, 2 months is enough. Let me go do a month in DC and see if I like DC. And if I don't, move on to the next one. So I know first world problems, but really nice that, with being able to work remotely, my boss is like, tell me where to send your paycheck. Like, doesn't really matter anyway. It just goes into your bank account. Like, as long as you've got a decent internet connection and can work roughly 9 to 5 in any US time zone, I don't care, go for it. So that is my next task, is figuring out where the next long-term location is going to be. I was in Syracuse for a little over 8 years. I did 3 years at the SUI school, and then got a job offer at Tuzag, which is the company I'm still at, and moved around from Tip Hill to East Syracuse to, from downtown to East Syracuse to Tip Hill to North Syracuse, and then I just sold my house in North Syracuse in December. So now it's on to the next location. Haven't fully ruled out upstate New York, though. Definitely enjoy the community and the size up there, and just well networked. Made a lot of connections up there that obviously to this day are still playing off. So to Laura's point about getting a job through networking, she is not kidding. It is all about who you know, and who you can lean on. And you'd be amazed at how many people you'd had only met once, but can reach out to for an introduction and get your foot in the door.
Can I share a story, and
Sure.
maybe this will be beneficial? But and this is not me like bragging or anything. Like, I was so caught off guard, like I was almost in tears. But when I did my second mock interview, it went so well that when we finished, she sent my resume out to a bunch of people. So then I had like a real interview this morning. And at the end of it, they were like, yeah, you interviewed with such and such, and she sent your resume. Like, I was like almost in tears. And that was my first time ever meeting her. So that process really does work.
The benefit of Syracuse being a smaller community, especially in the tech world, is everyone knows everyone. And if that person doesn't know everyone, they work for someone who knows everyone. Like, you are not successful in the tech world in Syracuse unless you are networked. And once you hit that success level, you end up hiring other people. So it is really, really a awesome community and awesome experience to be part of. And while remote working is kind of changing engineering across the entire country, across the entire world, at the end of the day, it just comes down to interviewing well, not being nervous during your interview, or trying to not be nervous, knowing that the interview process has not changed in probably 40 years. And they ask the same questions, like the questions you hear in one interview, you're going to hear in other interviews. I would say it's important to realize that sometimes you aren't a fit for the job because the job isn't a fit for you, right? Like there are times that you can nail an interview and get through the whole process, and they're like, we think you're great. If we were hiring for this other role, we would hire you in a heartbeat, but you're not a fit because you don't have this particular experience, or oh, we're looking for someone more front end than full stack right now, or whatever it may be. So I think it's important to also realize that it's not a failure just because you didn't get a job offer. It is just more experience to know what you want and where to apply next. So I am definitely looking forward to doing mock interviews. I know I've got at least 2 lined up next week. And I have a couple open slots available as well. So feel free to schedule out a couple weeks in advance if you are interested in mock interviewing with me. But I'm not trying to say that a mock interview with me is going to be better than any of I think there are 10 employers on the list. And they are all great local employers who could provide real opportunities. So while it is a fake interview for this process, it is entirely possible, Latonia, to your point, that something real comes out of it, or you get forwarded on. Oh, Latonia, I can't promise that I'm going to say you're hired, because our interview process is much longer than just 30 minutes. But I have tried to condense pieces of our entire interview process down into 30 minutes, so you get a full broad exposure to everything.
At least try to commit to not make us cry. Can you at least do that?
I will say that I've already come up with the interview questions, and they've been signed off both by my boss, who has had 40 years of hiring experience, and has been run by Caitlin and Carolyn, who have been through the interviewing process more recently than I have. So I promise none of the questions are intentionally made to make you cry. They're just all real world experience questions. You also may want to bolt down your laptop to make sure that when you flip your table, when I ask some stereotypical questions, that the laptop doesn't go with it. But and it is real experience. Everyone you are interviewing with has interviewed someone for their company or is actively interviewing. I just posted a job on Indeed last week or 2 weeks ago. It is more of a senior position, but it's like everyone you are interviewing with, they may not be a technical interviewer, but they are someone who has definitely interviewed other people in the past. So really, really great experience. And a huge point of cohort 1 was not having a career coach and not having that aspect to be part of the curriculum. So was super excited to not only see Laura join the program at the beginning of cohort 2, but continue to see all of her slides in the modules and what she's covering, because her experience is really top notch. We've got 9 more minutes. I'll stick around for a couple to see if there are any other questions that pop up. Otherwise, we will end a couple minutes early.
I have a etiquette question.
Yes.
So when I was pulling together some of my information that's going to be on my website, I recently went to the Erie Canal Museum website, and their search is broken. It actually pulls up failed pulls from the database, from their database it posts.
Yep.
Is it good practice to reach out and tell them that the website's failing?
at the very least, you can shoot them in email and just say like, hey, heads up, you probably haven't tested this in a while, but like this part of your website is broken. You don't want to cross the line into being like, and I know how to fix it. Like you don't want to quite imply that. But sending a screenshot, like attaching it, because one big thing I'll get is like someone will give me a bug report and then not be specific about like where it's breaking. And I'll test it and be like, oh, it must have been their crappy internet connection. Like it's not really a problem. And then I'll get another bug report and realize that like the first bug report just didn't tell me where it was broken. I am a big fan of sending screen recordings, like actually QuickTime on the Mac, it's built in where you can just say new screen recording. And I know Windows has it built in too, where you can like do a screen recording, actually load their website, type in a search, hit the go button, have the error message show up, and then send that whole thing. Because someone may not have worked on that website for 5 years and it broke due to something outside of their control. And then they were like, I don't even remember where the search is on that web page, like, so sending the screen recording can be helpful, trying to make it as short as possible because video files don't like to go through email spam filters. But yes, if you can find a contact email, sometimes that's hard to do. Like they just won't have a contact us, or they do, but it's a form and it won't let you like attach a file. But yes, it is considered generally good etiquette to report bugs. Even if it doesn't get fixed, at least like you tried to make it better for the next user that happens to end up on that web page.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times that people will send me things and be like, really? Like, this is just really obviously blatantly broken. And it's like, yeah, that's the internet for you. Sean, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry I'm late.
Oh, you're good.
Can I ask a question? It's maybe kind of basic about JavaScript.
Sure.
So let me share the code with you. I just sent the code. I think it might be Clojure, but I don't know exactly what Clojure is, because there are two functions on the console. The number 5 is printed last, while it's in the first function.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna copy and paste this into the pasted code channel just so everyone can see what we're referencing. So the notion of a closure is that we think about the order that this code runs. Let me just share my Slack window so I can kind of highlight things as we go through it. So the notion of a closure is a function accessing data outside of its own function. And closures are one of those things that like computer science engineers who like love theory love to go on and on about closures and about how JavaScript manages closures, and they love to overcomplicate the subject. And at the end of the day, it isn't something when you write code that happens a lot in practice, or that you need to know like the inner workings of the closure. But basically, the way we look at this is we say, okay, we are declaring fn1 here, but that doesn't actually run until we add in our parentheses at the end of it. So, okay, what happens when the fn1 runs? First thing we do is we set our const output, and then we have this set timeout going on in here. So this set timeout is saying wait 3000 milliseconds or 3 seconds before we run this console log. So this whole set timeout isn't a closure itself. So what's going to happen is we're going to set our output to 5. We're going to have this set timeout start the 3-second timer, but then we are going to console log our last console message, wait until the remaining 3000 seconds or 3000 milliseconds is done, and then console log out this output. Now, the fact that we are referencing this output outside of its function itself is what makes it a closure. The closure is like saying go outside of the function and try and figure out what the output is, and then console log that in here. So whenever we access data outside of its own function, scope, that is called the closure because it is trying to access data from outside of the function. There is, there was a book with like 13 chapters or 15 chapters, and we used it extensively in the first cohort.
You don't know JS.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it is a very polarizing book. Either you I don't know that it was You Don't Know JS, although that is a good one.
The only reason I said that is because I think he has an actual book that talks about closures.
You
Like
Don't
it's-
Know JS is one of them, and I can recommend that. There's one that's like a beige-ish page, and it's got all the links at the top of it.
Ooh. I don't know because the other one that they pushed was Eloquent JavaScript.
That was it.
Okay.
Eloquent JavaScript. Do they have closures in here? Wow, they don't cover closures?
That's why I said You Don't Know JS because he has an actual. Hold on. Let me go into the correct room because I'm pretty sure that that's where it is.
Wow, I am shocked that Eloquent JavaScript does not cover closure.
That is surprising too because they covered like everything. I thought.
Maybe it's in a different module. Yeah, here it is.
And I have
Okay.
both of those books, so
Oh, did that? Yeah. Okay, so the second link is from Eloquent JavaScript. If you want more understanding at kind of a high level, Eloquent JavaScript is a great resource. Eloquent JavaScript is the one that I was thinking of that's very polarizing. So either you love Eloquent JavaScript and you find the way the author describes things in JavaScript to be like a perfect match for you, or you won't be able to stand it and can't understand why I would ever recommend that as a resource. One of those very polarizing things. We did kind of build our curriculum around Eloquent JavaScript, but more around the higher order, like what are the concepts that we need to cover in JavaScript? Let's pull that list from Eloquent JavaScript and then find ways to teach them kind of around that list. So Eloquent JavaScript, I can't stand it. I hate using that, but I also recognize that it is a resource that a lot of people read and have a lot of light bulb moments with it. So if you tend to be one of the more like, you have to understand the theory and the concepts before you are able to put it in practice, you will love Eloquent JavaScript. You Don't Know JS is probably just as popular as Eloquent JavaScript, or if not more popular. And they have an entire like pages and pages about scope and closures and how code compiles. And personally, I'm already sick. It makes me even sicker thinking about understanding code at that level and knowing how the computer kind of pulls apart code and makes code work behind the scenes. That just gives me an even bigger headache than I have right now. But I am one of those people who say, just give me enough understanding so I know what I need to make something work. There are some people's brains, they can't get to that level of writing code until they understand what that code is doing under the scene, behind the scenes, under the hood. And that is when both You Don't Know JS and Eloquent JavaScript are really helpful. So if you think about things as kind of the engineering approach of like, how do I build this from scratch? Then both those resources are super helpful. and I will also put them in the Slack channel as well. Eloquent JavaScript is where I would recommend starting. And if you're still curious after it, then move on to You Don't Know JS. But again, I mean, You Don't Know JS has 142,000 stars on GitHub. I don't even know that React has that many stars. So like, super popular resource, and it is all open source. With that said, if you are someone who likes to read physical books, I believe you can actually buy a physical copy of both You Don't Know JS and Eloquent JavaScript. So,
okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, only because I have both. The You Don't Know JS is actually broken down into like 6 books. There's like Up and Going is, I think, the first one. This and Object Prototypes, Types and Grammar, ES6 and Beyond. And then there's it's thin. It's not very thick, and it's Scopes and Closures. And then Async and Performance is the last book. Eloquent JavaScript was not one of my favorites because it is hard to read. I did better with You Don't Know JS.
Eloquent JavaScript is one of those where like it takes you reading the sentence 10 times in order for you to understand it. But once you understand it, it's a real light bulb moment of like, oh, wow, that actually did help me. So it's one of those, like, it's harder to understand what they're saying. But once you do understand it, it is a very succinct way that they worded it to get that concept across. So I can't say these resources are going to be a silver bullet for you. You know, it is possible that you look at either one of them and you go, I don't know what Max was smoking when he recommended those. But you also may read through them and be like, oh, I thought I had a decent idea of how this worked. And now that I had a little background on it, reading Eloquent JavaScript made it click more for me. We were actually talking about that in the handoff meeting today of like, how much do the students understand async and await? And it's like, well, they probably wouldn't be creating a promise from scratch, but at the same time, they can understand we've got to label a function as asynchronous before we can tell the database, hey, await for that query to finish running, right? And so if you're like, I would like to know more about async await, there is literally a folder in that Git repo. Oh no, they haven't finished the second edition of this yet. So you would probably have to find the first edition somewhere. But anyway, like literally chapters and chapters that you can understand that, like I said, make my brain hurt and haven't prevented me from moving from entry to junior to a senior level dev. But at the same time, if you are someone who needs understanding before you use those concepts, both of those resources are super helpful. It is 7:35. I will stick around for another 2 minutes just in case there are any other questions. Otherwise, I think you guys should get your weekend started. I'm going to go hit the Dayquil. Crazy night for me.
I have a question about the technical part of job interviews, like the etiquette. If you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to, and it's not something like, you know, just what a certain term means or something where you could just jot it down and look it up later. Like if they're showing you a whole piece of code and you don't completely understand it, after you do your best to take a stab at it, is it okay to ask them how it's working? Because
absolutely,
that would make me curious. Like, okay, I want to understand this now, you know?
2 parts of that. One, you could ask them for feedback after the call. So like shoot them an email, and you should always be doing a follow-up interview, a follow-up email, or even like a handwritten note. You know, Laura talks all about standing out, and I am a huge fan of how do you stand out. I always try and learn a personal thing about the interviewer. Not saying like prying into their life or trying to get their social security number, but like, you know, some fun hobby that they do, or some, you know, oh, they go to the beach with their kids, or like just some little fun fact. And then I also try and get their address, and oftentimes their address, their office address, not their home address. But if you get their office address, you can send them a thank you card. And what that thank you card does is not only is it handwritten so they know you took time on it, but it's a thing sitting on their desk. And so now all of a sudden, they go for the next round of interviewing and they've got a thank you note sitting on their desk reminding them, hey, you interviewed, you got to know them, there was some personal connection. And now all of a sudden you've kind of emulated what it would be like if you were on their team working with them. So that is my kind of little trick of whenever you interview, if you can get an address, if they have an office address on their website or as part of their email signature or something like that, the thank you card is my personal little trick for that. With all of that said, when I get a rejection email, the first thing that I do is I send a follow-up email that says, hey, no problem. I completely understand. Good luck on your job search. Just so I've got a better opportunity next time, could you provide me a little more feedback as to why you didn't select me to move on to the next round, or select me as a candidate, or however you want to word it. So that's something that I do regardless of whether it was a technical interview or not. You do want to watch your time, because chances are they won't save a ton of time for you for questions at the end of the interview. But it is definitely something that you can ask in a follow-up email. Sorry, I realize I'm still sharing my screen. You can definitely ask in a follow-up email and say, hey, like, I've just been thinking about the code that I was working through during the interview. Is it possible for you to provide a solution for me just so I know how to approach that next time? Or, that was the first time I was using a new language. Could you provide a resource for me onto understanding that concept or something like that? Because, you are investing time into the interview, and so are they. And that doesn't have to end at the end of the 30-minute interview slot. So asking questions either during the interview or after the interview is a great way to keep your foot in the door, and say, get your name just in their brain more than that 30 minutes. Because when I am interviewing, I will do 30-minute interviews for an 8-hour day and have 16 candidates. Like, I just go back to back. You want to talk about an energy drain? Teaching might be number one. Interviewing is right behind it. Where it is just, you get to the end of it, and if you don't do 25-minute interviews like I do on my Calendly, you've got no time to take notes at the end of it. And so, Latonia, to your point, that's the struggle of making interviews only be 25 minutes and taking notes, not where you're going to really. It's really about what impression did you get from that person and how are you going to remember them. And I make sure my hiring notes are not accessible to people after they are hired, because we put everything in a shared Google Drive at work, and everyone gets access to that as an employee once they come into the company. So it would be pretty easy to do a search for hiring, find that folder, go to my notes, and be able to see all the things of saying, like, don't know if they're a good candidate yet, would need to test them a little bit more on, like, blah, 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 right? Or there's an episode in The Office where Dwight steals all of Michael's like Rolodex or index cards, and the index cards are highlighted with, like, these are topics that you shouldn't approach, or like, here are things you shouldn't bring up. And Dwight goes in and to try and steal a customer, and is like, how's your gay son doing at college? Do you think he's adjusting well? And Michael's snickering, and he goes, no, anything highlighted in yellow are off limits topics. Like, we don't talk about them. So there are times in my interview notes where it's not like I'm writing down every negative quality, but like, there may be something I write down to jog my memory, that I wouldn't want to share with a coworker if we end up deciding to hire them. So you've got to be careful about who you share your notes with. But at the same time, last time we did a hiring round, we had 250 applicants in 2 weeks, 200 applicants in 2 weeks. It was the height of all the COVID layoffs or all the COVID furloughs, and just left and right companies were saying, where can we cut money? And they went right to software developers because they thought software developers only work on new features. We don't need them for existing features. We'll furlough them first and pay the consequence of that because, hey, it turns out that it takes software developers to maintain software in addition to building software. And oh, by the way, those software developers were experts in the features you had already built or the products you already built. If you lose them, there is a several month onboarding process until they become completely as effective or helpful as someone that you may have furloughed who took a job somewhere else. So notes is the short answer to that rambling question. Is you just have to take notes. You have to write down things that, I'm not suggesting this, but might not be as politically correct, but some way to just jog your memory of like, what was that conversation that I had with them? How am I, if I look through 15 pages of notes, what's the couple keywords that would jog my memory of what I talked about with, last time? Because names alone are not something that you can approach. That's one part. The other part is having a very solidified interviewing process. So making sure that the interview process is exactly the same across all candidates. So you're not accidentally sending email to someone who may be further along in the interview process, asking them to do the same thing. We never have more than, I'll say, 10-ish candidates who make it past the second phase of our interview. So it becomes easier at that point. But until then, it's a bunch of spreadsheets and a bunch of tracking. And there is software to do all of that. Indeed helps with that. That's the main platform we have used. There are, I'm blanking on the category. There's a specific category for talent acquisition and the name of the category of software that tracks that. It's a type of a CRM, which is a customer resource manager. Gonna drive me crazy because I can't. Customer relationship managers, excuse me, is a CRM. ATM, acquisition and talent management software. It's gonna bother me. I'll think of it tonight. Anyway, yes, it is a interesting field. Any other questions? You guys are free to leave. We're way over time. But I'm happy to answer any more questions. I've got nowhere to be. All right. Well, in that case, have an awesome weekend. If you have any questions about the homework assignment, let me know. I will not only get you feedback on your homework from this weekend, I will also go back and catch up on last week's as well. Otherwise, have an awesome time with Nathan and Ryan and Caitlin next week. Feel free to continue scheduling one-on-ones with me, and hopefully I'll see you guys in mock interviews. Sounds good. See you guys.